Hey guys, tonight we're travelling back to the cradle of Western civilization, to marble columns, philosophical debates, and the birthplace of democracy. But before you romanticize ancient Greece as some sunlit paradise of wisdom and beauty, let me tell you something. You wouldn't last a single day, because behind the togas and temples lies a world of brutal labour, aggressive nudity, and a casual acceptance of violence that would make a modern prison yard look civilized. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations! You've just woken up in ancient Athens around 420 BCE. The Parthenon gleams on the hilltop above. You, philosophers, are already arguing in the agora, and somewhere nearby, a group of naked men are rubbing themselves down with olive oil before wrestling each other into submission. Welcome to classical Greece, where civilization and savagery walk hand in hand. Your eyes flutter open, and immediately you're assaulted by sensations that would send any modern person running for the nearest airport. You're lying on what can generously be called a bed, though it's really just a wooden frame with leather straps stretched across it, topped with a thin wool mattress that's seen better decades. No box spring, no memory foam, no adjustable firmness settings. Just you, some questionable fabric, and whatever insects decided to make your sleeping space their permanent residence. The room around you is sparse. If you're an average Athenian citizen, your home is a simple mud brick structure with small windows, no glass, just wooden shutters that do almost nothing to keep out the cold, heat, dust, or the neighbours' loud breakfast arguments. The floor is packed earth or rough stone. The walls are bare, maybe adorned with a single piece of pottery if you're feeling fancy. There's no thermostat, no central heating, and certainly no air conditioning. In summer, you bake. In winter, you freeze while huddling around a small charcoal brazier that fills the room with smoke and gives you a persistent cough that everyone just accepts as normal. Privacy? That's a modern luxury. Your entire family sleeps in one or two rooms. If you're married, your wife and children are nearby. If you have slaves, and statistically you probably do, if you're a citizen of any means, they're sleeping in the courtyard or in a corner of the same room. There are no separate bedrooms, no master suites, no walk-in closets. Just communal living with all the sounds, smells, and uncomfortable proximity that entails. You sit up, and your body immediately protests. You're probably in your 20s, but you feel 40. Greek beds aren't designed for spinal health. Your back aches, your neck is stiff, and your joints crack like broken pottery as you stretch. The Greeks have incredible doctors like Hippocrates, but ergonomic furniture hasn't made their priority list yet. The air smells like olive oil, wood smoke, and the vague funk of too many unwashed bodies in close quarters. Bathing is a thing, but it's not a daily thing. More like a weekly thing, or a whenever you get around to it thing. Deodorant doesn't exist, and neither does the concept of personal space. Outside, the rooster is crowing. Not one rooster, multiple roosters, all competing to see who can be the most obnoxiously loud at dawn. Dogs are barking, donkeys are braying. Somewhere, a baby is screaming. The city is already awake, and you're about to join it. You swing your legs off the bed, your bare feet touching the cool floor. No slippers, no plush rugs, just cold stone and the occasional splinter if you're unlucky. You glance around for something to wear. Your options are limited. Very limited. Welcome to ancient Greece. You've been awake for 2 minutes and the day's barely started. Now that you're conscious and vaguely aware of your surroundings, it's time to get dressed. And here's where things get interesting, because Greek fashion is both simpler and more complicated than you'd think. Your wardrobe consists of exactly two items, a chiton and a hymation. That's it. The chiton is essentially a large rectangular piece of wool or linen that you drape over your body and pin at the shoulders. It's like wearing a bedsheet with aspirations. The hymation is a cloak, another rectangle of fabric that you wrap around yourself for warmth or modesty. Though modesty is a flexible concept in ancient Greece, no underwear. That's right, Greeks don't wear anything under their chitons. You're going commando in a society where sitting on stone benches is the primary form of furniture. Hope you're comfortable with that. If you're a woman, your chiton is longer, reaching your ankles, and you're expected to wear it properly pinned and draped. If you're a man, yours might fall to your knees, or if you're doing manual labour, you might hitch it up even shorter. Athletes and labourers often work completely naked, because apparently the Greeks believe the human body is a work of art that should be displayed at all times, regardless of what you're doing or who's watching. The fabric is coarse, wool is itchy, linen is better if you can afford it, but it wrinkles the moment you move. There's no elastic, no buttons, no zippers. Everything is held together with pins called fibulae, and if you're not careful, you'll stab yourself while getting dressed. It's like wearing a toga at a college party, except it's every day of your life, and there's no pizza waiting for you afterward. Footwear is optional. Most people go barefoot indoors and wear simple leather sandals outside. These sandals are basically just soles strapped to your feet with leather thongs. No arch support, no cushioning, no protection from sharp rocks or the various biological hazards that litter Greek streets. If you're wealthy, your sandals might be slightly more elaborate. If you're poor, you're toughening up those feet the old-fashioned way. Hair and grooming follow strict social codes. Men typically wear their hair short, though young men might grow it longer as a sign of their youth and vigour. Beards are mandatory for adult citizens. A clean-shaven face marks you as either a boy, a barbarian, or someone with questionable judgment. Women wear their hair long, tied up in elaborate styles with ribbons, pins, and sometimes nets. Cutting a woman's hair short is a sign of mourning or shame. Jewellery exists, but it's modest unless you're wealthy. A simple bronze ring, maybe a fibula with some decorative detail. The wealthy drape themselves in gold, but if you're an average citizen, you're lucky to have a decent pin that doesn't rust. Makeup is rare among respectable women, though prostitutes wear it liberally. White lead for pale skin, red ochre for cheeks and lips, coal for the eyes. It's toxic, but beauty standards wait for no one, not even the threat of lead poisoning. You finish draping your chiton, secure it with your fibula, and wrap your hymation around your shoulders. You look in the polished bronze mirror, which gives you a warped, dim reflection that makes you look like a blurry ghost. Good enough. Now dressed, or as dressed as ancient Greece allows, you're ready to face the next challenge, morning hygiene. And trust me, this is where things get medieval. Let's talk about Greek bathrooms, or rather, the complete lack thereof. Because if you thought medieval Europe had it rough, ancient Greece gives it a run for its money. There's no indoor plumbing in your house, no toilet, no sink, no running water. If nature calls in the middle of the night, you're using a chamber pot, a simple clay vessel that sits in the corner of your room, collecting the night's offerings with all the dignity of a public trash can. Come morning, it's your job, or more likely, your slave's job, to empty that pot. Where? Into the street, usually. Some cities have designated waste collection areas, but enforcement is spotty at best. More often, people just fling the contents out the door or into an alleyway, shouting a warning first if they're feeling courteous. The streets of Athens are a minefield of human and animal waste, rotting food scraps, and other unidentifiable liquids that you learn not to examine too closely. If you need to do your business during the day, you have a few options. Wealthier homes might have a small private latrine. basically a hole in the ground connected to a drainage ditch that hopefully flows somewhere away from your living space. Public latrines exist in some cities, communal stone benches with holes cut into them, positioned over a flowing stream or cesspit. Privacy, non-existent. You sit shoulder to shoulder with your fellow citizens, conducting your business while discussing politics, philosophy, or the price of olives. Toilet paper hasn't been invented. Instead, you use whatever's available. Broken pieces of pottery called pessoi, smooth stones, or, if you're fancy, a sponge attached to a stick. The sponge, called a tessorium by the Romans later, is sometimes communal, rinsed in a bucket of vinegar or salt water between uses. Yes, communal. Let that sink in. Washing your hands afterward is theoretically possible if there's a fountain or basin nearby, but soap as we know it doesn't exist. You might rinse with water, maybe rub your hands with ash or sand for a bit of abrasion, but that's about it. The concept of germs is still 2 millennia away. Bathing is a different story. The Greeks value cleanliness, at least in theory. If you're wealthy, you might have a small private bath at home filled with water heated over a fire and carried in by slaves. It's lukewarm at best, and shared by multiple family members before it's dumped. For most people, bathing happens at the public baths or gymnasium. Men strip naked, cover themselves in olive oil, exercise, scrape the oil off with a curved metal tool called a strigil, and then rinse. Hey guys, tonight we're travelling back to the cradle of Western civilization, to marble columns, philosophical debates, and the birthplace of democracy. But before you romanticize ancient Greece as some sunlit paradise of wisdom and beauty, let me tell you something. You wouldn't last a single day, because behind the togas and temples lies a world of brutal labour, aggressive nudity, and a casual acceptance of violence that would make a modern prison yard look civilized. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations! You've just woken up in ancient Athens around 420 BCE. The Parthenon gleams on the hilltop above. You, philosophers, are already arguing in the agora, and somewhere nearby, a group of naked men are rubbing themselves down with olive oil before wrestling each other into submission. Welcome to classical Greece, where civilization and savagery walk hand in hand. Your eyes flutter open, and immediately you're assaulted by sensations that would send any modern person running for the nearest airport. You're lying on what can generously be called a bed, though it's really just a wooden frame with leather straps stretched across it, topped with a thin wool mattress that's seen better decades. No box spring, no memory foam, no adjustable firmness settings. Just you, some questionable fabric, and whatever insects decided to make your sleeping space their permanent residence. The room around you is sparse. If you're an average Athenian citizen, your home is a simple mud brick structure with small windows, no glass, just wooden shutters that do almost nothing to keep out the cold, heat, dust, or the neighbours' loud breakfast arguments. The floor is packed earth or rough stone. The walls are bare, maybe adorned with a single piece of pottery if you're feeling fancy. There's no thermostat, no central heating, and certainly no air conditioning. In summer, you bake. In winter, you freeze while huddling around a small charcoal brazier that fills the room with smoke and gives you a persistent cough that everyone just accepts as normal. Privacy? That's a modern luxury. Your entire family sleeps in 1 or 2 rooms. If you're married, your wife and children are nearby. If you have slaves, and statistically you probably do, if you're a citizen of any means, they're sleeping in the courtyard or in a corner of the same room. There are no separate bedrooms, no master suites, no walk-in closets, just communal living with all the sounds, smells, and uncomfortable proximity that entails. You sit up, and your body immediately protests. You're probably in your 20s, but you feel 40. Greek beds aren't designed for spinal health. Your back aches, your neck is stiff, and your joints crack like broken pottery as you stretch. The Greeks have incredible doctors like Hippocrates, but ergonomic furniture hasn't made their priority list yet. The air smells like olive oil, wood smoke, and the vague funk of too many unwashed bodies in close quarters. Bathing is a thing, but it's not a daily thing. More like a weekly thing, or a whenever you get around to it thing. Deodorant doesn't exist, and neither does the concept of personal space. Outside, the rooster is crowing. Not one rooster, multiple roosters, all competing to see who can be the most obnoxiously loud at dawn. Dogs are barking, donkeys are braying. Somewhere, a baby is screaming. The city is already awake, and you're about to join it. You swing your legs off the bed, your bare feet touching the cool floor. No slippers, no plush rugs, just cold stone and the occasional splinter if you're unlucky. You glance around for something to wear. Your options are limited. Very limited. Welcome to ancient Greece. You've been awake for 2 minutes and the day's barely started. Now that you're conscious and vaguely aware of your surroundings, it's time to get dressed. And here's where things get interesting, because Greek fashion is both simpler and more complicated than you'd think. Your wardrobe consists of exactly 2 items, a chiton and a hymation. That's it. The chiton is essentially a large rectangular piece of wool or linen that you drape over your body and pin at the shoulders. It's like wearing a bedsheet with aspirations. The hymation is a cloak, another rectangle of fabric that you wrap around yourself for warmth or modesty. Though modesty is a flexible concept in ancient Greece. No underwear. That's right. Greeks don't wear anything under their chitons. You're going commando in a society where sitting on stone benches is the primary form of furniture. Hope. You're comfortable with that. If you're a woman, your chiton is longer, reaching your ankles, and you're expected to wear it properly pinned and draped. If you're a man, yours might fall to your knees, or if you're doing manual labour, you might hitch it up even shorter. Athletes and labourers often work completely naked, because apparently the Greeks believe the human body is a work of art that should be displayed at all times, regardless of what you're doing or who's watching. The fabric is coarse, wool is itchy, linen is better if you can afford it, but it wrinkles the moment you move. There's no elastic, no buttons, no zippers. Everything is held together with pins called fibulae, and if you're not careful, you'll stab yourself while getting dressed. It's like wearing a toga at a college party, except it's every day of your life, and there's no pizza waiting for you afterward. Footwear is optional. Most people go barefoot indoors and wear simple leather sandals outside. These sandals are basically just soles strapped to your feet with leather thongs. No arch support, no cushioning, no protection from sharp rocks or the various biological hazards that litter Greek streets. If you're wealthy, your sandals might be slightly more elaborate. If you're poor, you're toughening up those feet the old-fashioned way. Hair and grooming follow strict social codes. Men typically wear their hair short, though young men might grow it longer as a sign of their youth and vigour. Beards are mandatory for adult citizens. A clean-shaven face marks you as either a boy, a barbarian, or someone with questionable judgment. Women wear their hair long, tied up in elaborate styles with ribbons, pins, and sometimes nets. Cutting a woman's hair short is a sign of mourning or shame. Jewellery exists, but it's modest unless you're wealthy. A simple bronze ring, maybe a fibula with some decorative detail. The wealthy drape themselves in gold, but if you're an average citizen, you're lucky to have a decent pin that doesn't rust. Makeup is rare among respectable women, though prostitutes wear it liberally. White lead for pale skin, Red ochre for cheeks and lips, coal for the eyes. It's toxic, but beauty standards wait for no one, not even the threat of lead poisoning. You finish draping your chiton, secure it with your fibula, and wrap your hymation around your shoulders. You look in the polished bronze mirror, which gives you a warped, dim reflection that makes you look like a blurry ghost. Good enough. Now dressed, or as dressed as ancient Greece allows, you're ready to face the next challenge, morning hygiene. And trust me, this is where things get medieval. Let's talk about Greek bathrooms, or rather, the complete lack thereof. Because if you thought medieval Europe had it rough, ancient Greece gives it a run for its money. There's no indoor plumbing in your house, no toilet, no sink, no running water. If nature calls in the middle of the night, you're using a chamber pot, a simple clay vessel that sits in the corner of your room, collecting the night's offerings with all the dignity of a public trash can. Come morning, it's your job, or more likely, your slave's job, to empty that pot. Where? Into the street, usually. Some cities have designated waste collection areas, but enforcement is spotty at best. More often, people just fling the contents out the door or into an alleyway, shouting a warning first if they're feeling courteous. The streets of Athens are a minefield of human and animal waste, rotting food scraps, and other unidentifiable liquids that you learn not to examine too closely. If you need to do your business during the day, you have a few options. Wealthier homes might have a small private latrine, basically a hole in the ground connected to a drainage ditch that hopefully flows somewhere away from your living space. Public latrines exist in some cities, communal stone benches with holes cut into them, positioned over a flowing stream or cesspit. Privacy, non-existent. You sit shoulder to shoulder with your fellow citizens, conducting your business while discussing politics, philosophy, or the price of olives. Toilet paper hasn't been invented. Instead, you use whatever's available. Broken pieces of pottery called pessoi, smooth stones, or, if you're fancy, a sponge attached to a stick. The sponge, called a tessorium by the Romans later, is sometimes communal. The afternoon in ancient Greece brings a brief respite from the morning's labour, but it's not exactly relaxing. The heat is oppressive, especially in summer, and the city slows to a crawl. This is when you eat your main meal, if you can call it that, and try to survive the remaining hours before sunset. Lunch is the largest meal of the day, though large is relative. For most people, it's still bread, olives, cheese, and maybe some vegetables. Lentil soup is common, a thick, hearty stew made with lentils, onions, and olive oil. It's filling, nutritious, and cheap, which makes it a staple of the Greek diet. If you're wealthy or it's a special occasion, you might have fish. Fish is more accessible than meat for coastal Greeks, and it's often grilled, baked, or fried in olive oil. Tuna, mullet, and eel are popular, though nothing is wasted. Heads, bones, and guts are all used in broths or fed to slaves. Meat appears only during festivals or sacrifices. When an animal is sacrificed, to the gods, the meat is distributed among worshippers. It's one of the few times common people eat beef, pork, or lamb. The sacrifice is religious, but the feast is social, a rare communal indulgence in a society where food is often scarce. Vegetables are seasonal and limited. Cabbage, onions, garlic, and leeks are common. Lettuce and cucumbers appear in summer. Root vegetables like turnips and radishes are eaten raw or cooked. There's no refrigeration, so preservation methods like salting, drying, and pickling are essential. Wine flows freely at lunch, though always diluted. Drinking wine straight is seen as reckless and uncivilized, something only barbarians do. Symposia, the famous Greek drinking parties, happen in the evening, but for now, wine is just hydration with a buzz. Meals are eaten while reclining, if you're a man and wealthy enough to afford a dining couch. Women eat separately, often in their own quarters, and slaves eat last, usually scraps and leftovers. Eating together as a family the way modern people imagine it doesn't really happen. Gender segregation is strict and meals are no exception. After lunch, the city takes a siesta. It's too hot to work, too bright to think clearly, so people retreat indoors or find shade. Men might gather in the agora to gossip or debate, but most serious business waits until the temperature drops. If you're a man with leisure time, this is when you might visit the gymnasium. The gymnasium is more than a gym. It's a social club, a bathhouse, and an educational centre all rolled into one. Men exercise naked, a tradition the Greeks are oddly proud of, engaging in wrestling, boxing, running, and discus throwing. The word gymnasium literally comes from the Greek word for naked. Exercise is seen as essential for maintaining a healthy body and mind. The Greeks believe in the ideal of kalos kagathos, beautiful and good, a balance of physical fitness and moral virtue. A flabby, lazy citizen is a disgrace. A fit, athletic one is celebrated. After exercising, you scrape off the sweat and oil with your strigil, rinse in cold water, and socialise with other men. Conversations range from politics to philosophy to gossip about who's sleeping with whom. The gymnasium is where ideas are exchanged, alliances are formed, and reputations are built or destroyed. Women, of course, are not allowed in the gymnasium. Their exercise consists of household chores, which is apparently sufficient in the eyes of Greek society. There's no yoga, no Pilates, no women's fitness classes, just endless domestic labour. Slaves don't get a siesta. They work through the heat, serving their masters, cooking meals, hauling water, and doing whatever needs to be done. Exhaustion is expected. Complaints are punished. As the afternoon wears on, the city begins to stir again. Shops reopen, craftsmen return to their work, and the business of daily life resumes. The sun is still high, but the worst of the heat has passed. You stretch, adjust your sweat-soaked chiton, and prepare for the final stretch of the day. The evening is coming, and with it, the closest thing ancient Greece has to leisure. Evening in ancient Greece is when social life truly begins, at least for men. If you're a citizen with time and money, this is when you gather with friends for a symposium, the famous Greek drinking party that's part intellectual salon, part frat party. The symposium is a strictly male affair. Women are not invited, except for entertainers, prostitutes called hetairai, who are educated, witty, and far more socially mobile than respectable wives. These women can engage in philosophical debates, recite poetry, and charm the attendees in ways that wives confined to their domestic quarters cannot. The symposium begins after dinner, which is another simple meal of bread, fish, vegetables, and wine. Once the food is cleared, the drinking begins in earnest. But this isn't just about getting drunk. It's a ritualized social event with rules, customs, and expectations. A symposiarch, a master of ceremonies, is chosen to decide how strong the wine will be mixed. Remember, Greeks always dilute their wine with water, usually at a ratio of 3:1. The symposiarch controls the ratio, and therefore the pace of intoxication. Too weak and the party is boring. Too strong and things get out of hand quickly. Wine is served in kratas, large mixing bowls, and ladled into kylix cups, shallow drinking vessels that are passed around and refilled constantly. Toasts are made, songs are sung, and philosophical debates erupt. Plato's famous dialogues often take place at symposia, where Socrates and his students discuss love, justice, and the nature of reality as the evening grows louder and more animated. Entertainment is varied. Professional musicians play the aulos, a double-piped flute, or the lyre, a stringed instrument. Poets recite epic verses or compose improvised songs. Dancers perform, sometimes acrobatically, sometimes suggestively. Games are played, including kotabos, where participants flick wine dregs from their cups at a target, trying to knock it over. It's messy, competitive, and surprisingly entertaining. Philosophical discussions can get heated. Greeks love to argue, and symposia are the perfect setting for passionate debates about ethics, politics, and metaphysics. Socrates is famous for attending these gatherings and asking uncomfortable questions that force people to examine their beliefs. Some find it enlightening, others find it infuriating. As the night progresses, inhibitions drop. Flirtation happens openly, often involving hired companions who are permitted to attend these gatherings. Greek attitudes toward relationships and intimacy are complex and very different from modern values, shaped by social hierarchies and cultural expectations of the time. Not everyone attends symposia. The poor lack the money or social standing. Women are excluded entirely except as hired entertainers. Slaves serve the guests, refilling cups, clearing dishes, and managing the chaos of the evening. If you're not at a symposium, your evening is quieter. Families gather in courtyards, telling stories, mending clothes, or preparing for the next day. Oil lamps provide dim, flickering light, casting long shadows on the walls. The lamps are simple clay vessels, filled with olive oil, their slow-burning wicks giving off a faint scent of smoke. The city at night is dark. There are no streetlights, no electric glow, just moonlight and the occasional torch carried by someone brave enough to walk the streets after sunset. Night can be dangerous. Most people stay indoors, locking their doors and hoping for an uneventful night. Sleep comes early for those who aren't wealthy enough to afford oil for their lamps. You lie down on an uncomfortable bed, pull a wool blanket over yourself, and listen as the city settles into silence. Somewhere in the distance, a symposium is still raging. Laughter, music, and the occasional crash of pottery echo faintly through the streets. But for you, the day is over, and tomorrow it all begins again. Religion in ancient Greece is woven into every aspect of daily life. The gods are everywhere, watching, judging, and occasionally intervening in human affairs. Every home contains a small shrine dedicated to Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Daily offerings are made, a bit of food, a splash of wine, a quiet prayer for protection. Neglecting the household gods is believed to invite misfortune. Public religion is even more elaborate. Temples dominate the landscape, massive marble structures dedicated to gods like Athena, Zeus, Apollo, and Poseidon. These are sacred spaces maintained by priests and priestesses who perform rituals on behalf of the city. Sacrifice is central to worship. Animals such as sheep, goats, or cattle are offered in carefully prescribed ceremonies. Portions are dedicated to the gods, while the rest is cooked and shared among the community, one of the rare occasions when most people eat meat. Festivals are frequent and grand. The Panathenaea honours Athena with processions and athletic competitions. The Dionysia celebrates Dionysus through theatre, music, and communal celebration. These events reinforce social bonds and shared identity. Oracles guide major decisions. The Oracle of Delphi is the most famous, consulted about war, politics, marriage, and trade. Her answers are famously ambiguous, yet deeply trusted. Death and the afterlife are solemn matters. The dead are buried or cremated with offerings to ensure safe passage to the underworld. Without proper rites, souls are believed to wander, unable to find rest. The underworld is a shadowy realm. Most souls drift quietly, while only the truly wicked face punishment and the exceptional few reach a peaceful afterlife. The gods are powerful and unpredictable. They demand respect, ritual, and obedience. In return, they may grant favor or remain silent. Religion in ancient Greece is not about belief as we understand it today. It is about ritual, duty, and maintaining balance between humans and the divine. You make your offerings, follow the customs, and hope that it is enough. Greek education is reserved for boys and only for those whose families can afford it. If you're a girl, your education consists of learning to weave, manage a household, and obey your father and future husband. Literacy is rare among women, and intellectual pursuits are considered unnecessary, even dangerous. If you're a boy, your education begins around age 7. You're sent to a private tutor or a small school where you learn reading, writing, arithmetic, music, and physical education. The goal is to produce a well-rounded citizen, someone who can participate in public life, defend the city, and contribute to society. Reading and writing are taught using wax tablets and a stylus, a pointed stick for scratching letters into the wax. Mistakes are smoothed over and rewritten. Papyrus and ink exist but are expensive, reserved for important documents. Most of your learning happens on reusable wax. You memorize poetry, especially Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the foundational texts of Greek culture. These aren't just stories, they're moral lessons, cultural touchstones and examples of heroic virtue. You recite them aloud, learning rhythm, meter, and the values of courage, honor, and glory. Music is essential. You learn to play the lyre, a stringed instrument associated with Apollo and civilization. Music is seen as a way to cultivate the soul, to bring order and harmony to the mind. A man who can't play an instrument or sing is considered uncultured. Physical education happens at the gymnasium or paliestra, a wrestling school. You train in running, jumping, discus throwing, javelin and wrestling. The goal is to develop strength, agility and endurance, qualities essential for warfare. Greek city-states are constantly at war and every citizen is expected to serve as a soldier. Wrestling is the most important sport. It's not just about strength, it's about technique, balance and intelligence. Matches are brutal, full contact affairs where broken bones are common and referees are rare. You fight naked, covered in olive oil, grappling with your opponent until one of you submits or can't continue. At age 18, if you're an Athenian citizen, you enter the Ephebeia, a 2-year military training program. You learn to fight with a spear and shield, to march in formation, and to endure the hardships of military life. You guard the borders, patrol the countryside, and prepare for the wars that will inevitably come. Philosophical education is for the elite. If your family is wealthy, you might study with a sophist, a professional teacher who charges high fees to teach rhetoric, logic, and persuasion. Sophists are controversial, accused of teaching young men to argue any position, regardless of truth or morality. But they're effective, and their students often become successful politicians and lawyers. If you're exceptionally lucky or brilliant, you might study with philosophers like Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle. These men don't charge fees, at least not officially, but they're selective about their students. They teach through dialogue, asking questions, challenging assumptions, and pushing you to think critically about the world. Education ends in your early 20s, if it happens at all. For most Greeks, education is minimal, just enough reading and arithmetic to function in daily life. The rest is learned through apprenticeship, working alongside a father or master craftsman, learning a trade through repetition and observation. Women's education, such as it is, happens at home. Mothers teach daughters to spin, weave, cook, and manage a household. Some wealthy families hire tutors to teach girls music or poetry, but it's rare and controversial. A woman who's too educated is seen as dangerous, a threat to the social order. Slaves receive no formal education, though some are trained in specialized skills, accounting, medicine, tutoring, if their owners find it profitable. But literacy and philosophy are not for them. Their role is to serve, not to think. By the time you're an adult, if you're male and educated, you can read, write, argue persuasively, play an instrument, and hold your own in a wrestling match. You've memorized Homer, honored the gods, and trained for war. If you're female, you've learned to be silent, obedient, and invisible. You'll spend your life indoors, managing a household, raising children, and hoping your husband is kinder than he needs to be. Education in ancient Greece is not about equality or opportunity. It's about preparing citizens to fulfill their roles in a rigidly hierarchical society. And those roles, for better or worse, are decided at birth. Marriage in ancient Greece is not a love story. It's a transaction, a contract between families designed to produce legitimate heirs, consolidate property, and maintain social status. Romance, if it happens at all, is incidental. If you're a woman, you have no say in who you marry. Your father or male guardian arranges the marriage, usually when you're between 12 and 15 years old. Your husband is often much older, in his 20s or 30s, already established in his career and household. You meet him for the first time on or shortly before your wedding day. The wedding itself is a series of rituals designed to transfer you from your father's household to your husband's. You bathe in water from a sacred spring, dress in your finest clothes, and process through the streets in a torchlit parade. Your face is veiled, and you're accompanied by female relatives who sing and celebrate, though you might feel more terrified than joyful. At your new home, your husband greets you at the door, lifts you over the threshold to avoid bad luck, and presents you to the household gods. You make offerings, share a symbolic meal, and then retire to the bridal chamber. What happens next is expected, obligatory, and not something you have the right to refuse. Your role as a wife is clear: produce children, preferably sons, manage the household, and stay out of public life. You have no legal rights, no independent property, and no freedom to leave the house without permission. Your husband controls your dowry, makes all decisions, and can divorce you at will by simply sending you back to your father. Divorce is easy for men, difficult for women. A man can divorce his wife for infertility, disobedience, or no reason at all. A woman can request a divorce only through a male relative, and only for extreme reasons like abuse or neglect. Even then, her chances of success are slim. Adultery is treated asymmetrically. If a wife commits adultery, she's disgraced, divorced, and possibly killed. If a husband has affairs, it's expected, even socially acceptable, as long as he's discreet. Men visit prostitutes, maintain relationships with heterae, and engage in relationships with younger men, all without social penalty. Children are your primary purpose. Sons inherit property, carry on the family name, and provide for you in old age. Daughters are liabilities, requiring dowries and careful management to secure good marriages. Infanticide, especially of daughters or sickly infants, is legal and not uncommon. Babies are exposed, left outside to die, if the father decides not to raise them. Childbirth is dangerous. There's no anesthesia, no sterile equipment, no understanding of infection. Midwives assist, using techniques passed down through generations, but complications are common. Many women die in childbirth, and many infants don't survive their first year. If you survive childbirth and raise children successfully, you gain some respect and security. A mother of sons is valued, at least within the household. But you're still confined to the domestic sphere, rarely seen, rarely heard. Your life defined entirely by your relationships to men. If you're a man, marriage is less restrictive but still obligatory. You're expected to marry, produce heirs, and maintain your household. but your life continues largely unchanged. You still attend symposia, visit the agora, and engage in public life. Your wife manages the home while you manage everything else. Love, in the romantic sense, is not expected in marriage. That's what hetairai are for. Educated, charming women who provide intellectual and emotional companionship that wives, confined and uneducated, cannot. Some men develop affection for their wives over time, but it's not the foundation of the relationship. Greek marriage is pragmatic, hierarchical, and deeply unequal. It's designed to preserve social order, ensure legitimate inheritance, and maintain the structure of the polis. Personal happiness is secondary, if it's considered at all. You navigate this system as best you can, fulfilling your role, honouring your obligations, and hoping that your spouse, chosen by someone else, turns out to be tolerable. Because in ancient Greece, marriage is not about finding your soulmate. It's about fulfilling your duty, and duty, as always, comes first. Politics in ancient Greece, particularly in Athens, is revolutionary and chaotic in equal measure. This is where democracy is born, but it's a democracy that would horrify modern sensibilities. It's direct, participatory and exclusive, a system where citizens vote on laws, elect officials, and make decisions collectively, but only if they're male, freeborn and Athenian. If you're a citizen, participation is not optional, it's your civic duty. The assembly, or ecclesia, meets regularly on a hill called the Nix. Thousands of men gather to debate and vote on issues, ranging from war and peace to public spending and legal reforms. There's no representative government. You don't elect someone to vote for you. You show up, listen to speeches, and vote directly. Decisions are made by majority vote, sometimes with a show of hands, sometimes with pottery shards called ostraka. Ostracism is a unique Athenian practice where citizens vote to exile someone they consider a threat to democracy. If enough people write your name on a shard, you're banished from Athens for 10 years. No trial, no appeal. It's democracy's blunt instrument for dealing with political enemies. Offices are filled mostly by lottery, not election. The Greeks believe that elections favour the wealthy and charismatic, while random selection ensures that ordinary citizens have a chance to serve. You might be chosen by lot to serve on the council, the boule, for a year, helping to set the agenda for the assembly. It's an honour, a burden, and a significant time commitment. Trials are public spectacles. There are no professional judges or lawyers. Instead, large juries, sometimes hundreds of citizens, hear cases and vote on guilt or innocence. Accusers and defendants represent themselves, delivering speeches designed to persuade the jury through emotion, logic, or sheer charisma. Evidence is secondary to performance. Socrates' trial is a famous example. Accused of corrupting the youth and impiety, he defends himself with philosophical arguments that alienate the jury. He's convicted, sentenced to death, and famously drinks hemlock rather than renounce his principles. It's a reminder that democracy, even Athenian democracy, can be irrational, unjust, and deadly. Politics is deeply personal. Rivalries, feuds, and alliances shape decisions as much as policy. Slander is common, and public insults are an art form. Politicians hire speechwriters, cultivate networks, and sometimes resort to violence or bribery to achieve their goals. Warfare is constant. Greek city-states are perpetually at war with each other, or with foreign powers like Persia. Military service is mandatory for citizens, and generals are elected, not chosen by lot. Leadership in war is one of the few areas where skill and experience matter more than random chance. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta is a defining conflict. Decades of brutal fighting that drains resources, kills thousands, and ultimately weakens both cities. Thucydides' History of the War is a masterpiece of political and military analysis, documenting the strategies, speeches, and atrocities that characterize Greek warfare. If you're not a citizen, politics is something that happens to you, not something you participate in. Women, slaves, and foreigners have no vote, no voice, and no rights. Democracy is for the few, not the many. You attend the assembly when you can, vote on issues you understand and some you don't, and navigate the chaotic, vibrant, and deeply flawed system that is Athenian democracy. It's exhausting, empowering, and frustrating all at once. But it's also history in the making. The debates you hear, the decisions you vote on, the trials you witness, all of it shapes the future of Western civilization. And whether you realize it or not, you're part of something revolutionary. Even if that revolution is messy, exclusive, and occasionally insane. Let's talk about health, medicine, and the myriad ways your body can betray you in ancient Greece. Because while the Greeks make significant advances in medical knowledge, they're still centuries away from germ theory, antibiotics, or anything resembling modern healthcare. If you get sick, your first stop is probably not a doctor. It's a temple. The Greeks believe that illness is often caused by divine displeasure, so you make offerings to Asclepius, the god of healing, and hope for a cure. Temples dedicated to Asclepius function as healing centers where priests perform rituals and patients sleep in sacred spaces, hoping for a divine vision that will reveal the cure. If divine intervention doesn't work, you might consult a physician. Greek doctors, influenced by Hippocrates, practice a form of medicine that's surprisingly rational for the time. They observe symptoms, ask questions, and try to identify natural causes for illness, rather than blaming the gods for everything. The theory of the four humours dominates Greek medicine. Doctors believe that the body contains four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that illness results from an imbalance of these humours. Treatment involves restoring balance through diet, exercise, bloodletting, purging, or inducing vomiting. Bloodletting is a common treatment for almost everything. Feeling feverish? Let's drain some blood. Headache? More bloodletting. The logic is that removing excess blood will rebalance the humours. In reality, it often just makes you weaker and more vulnerable to infection. Herbal remedies are widely used. Willow bark for pain, which contains a compound similar to aspirin. Garlic for infections. Honey for wounds, which actually has antibacterial properties. Some remedies work, many don't. All of them are administered with confidence and hope. Surgery exists, but it's risky and painful. There's no anesthesia, just wine, opium if you're lucky, and someone to hold you down. Surgeons perform amputations, remove tumours, and drain abscesses using bronze or iron instruments. Infection is almost guaranteed, and survival is far from certain. Dental care is rudimentary. Toothaches are treated with extraction, a brutal process involving pliers and brute force. There are no fillings, no root canals, just pain and the hope that you don't die from infection afterward. Hygiene helps, but only so much. The Greeks understand that cleanliness reduces disease, but they don't know why. Public baths, while social and enjoyable, are also breeding grounds for bacteria and parasites. The water is rarely changed, and everyone shares it. Parasites are common. Intestinal worms, lice, fleas, and various other unwelcome guests live on and inside you. Deworming remedies exist, usually herbal concoctions that may or may not work. Mostly, you just live with the itching and discomfort. Epidemics sweep through cities periodically. Plague, typhus, dysentery, smallpox all take their toll. The plague of Athens during the Peloponnesian War kills thousands, including the great statesman Pericles. The city is overwhelmed, bodies pile up, and social order nearly collapses. Childbirth, as mentioned earlier, is one of the most dangerous experiences a woman can face. Midwives do their best, but complications like hemorrhaging, infection, or obstructed labour often prove fatal. Infant mortality is heartbreakingly high. Mental illness is poorly understood. The Greeks recognise that some people suffer from what they call melancholia or mania, but treatments are rudimentary. Rest, diet changes, sometimes confinement. Severe cases might be attributed to demonic possession or divine punishment. Injuries from war, labour or accidents are common. Broken bones are set with splints, wounds are cleaned and bandaged, but infection is the real killer. Many injuries that would be survivable today prove fatal in ancient Greece. You do your best to stay healthy. You eat a balanced diet, exercise regularly, avoid excesses, and pray to the gods for protection. But ultimately, your health is a gamble, subject to forces you barely understand and can't control. Medicine in ancient Greece is a mix of observation, superstition, and trial and error. It's the beginning of scientific medicine, but it's also still deeply tied to religion and philosophy. You hope you stay healthy, because if you don't, your treatment options range from unpleasant to agonizing, and your chances of recovery are far from guaranteed. Entertainment in ancient Greece is public, communal, and deeply tied to religious festivals. There's no Netflix, no video games, no mindless scrolling through social media. Entertainment is live, performed, and often competitive. Theatre is one of the most important forms of entertainment. Tragedies and comedies are performed during religious festivals, particularly the Dionysia, honouring the god Dionysus. These aren't small productions. They're massive public events held in open-air theatres that seat thousands. You sit on stone benches, carved into hillsides, with no cushions, no back support, and no protection from the sun. Performances last all day, sometimes multiple days, and you're expected to sit through all of them. Bring your own food, drink, and patience. Tragedies are serious, exploring themes of fate, justice, and human suffering. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides craft stories of gods and heroes, doomed by destiny or their own flaws. The performances are intense, emotional, and cathartic. You're meant to feel pity and fear, to reflect on your own mortality and the fragility of human life. Comedies are the opposite, bawdy, irreverent, and hilarious. Aristophanes writes plays that mock politicians, philosophers, and social norms with crude humour, sexual innuendo, and absurd plots. It's satire at its finest, and the audiences love it. Actors wear masks exaggerated, expressions that make their characters instantly recognisable, even from the back rows. All roles, including female characters, are played by men. Women are not allowed to perform, though they can attend as audience members sitting in separate sections. Athletic competitions are another major form of entertainment. The Olympic Games, held every 4 years in Olympia, are the most prestigious, but there are also the Pythian, Nemean, and Isthmian Games. These are religious festivals as much as sporting events, honouring Zeus, Apollo, and other gods. Athletes compete naked, a tradition that still baffles modern audiences, but makes perfect sense to Greeks who celebrate the human body. Events include running, wrestling, boxing, pancration, a brutal combination of wrestling and boxing with almost no rules, chariot racing, and the pentathlon, discus, javelin, long jump, running, and wrestling. Winners receive crowns of olive leaves, not gold medals, but the honour and fame are immense. They're celebrated as heroes, showered with gifts and privileges by their home cities. Some even have statues erected in their honour. Music and dance are integral to festivals and daily life. Processions feature musicians playing flutes, lyres and drums while dancers perform choreographed routines. Some dances are solemn and religious, others wild and ecstatic, especially those associated with Dionysus. Storytelling is a cherished tradition. Rhapsodes, professional reciters, perform epic poetry from memory, bringing Homer's tales to life with dramatic flair. You gather in the agora or at private homes to listen, mesmerized by the rhythm and imagery. Gambling exists, though it's technically illegal in some contexts. Dice games, board games like Petea, similar to checkers, and betting on athletic competitions are popular pastimes. Men gamble at symposia, wagering on everything from philosophical debates to drinking contests. Children play with toys, dolls, miniature chariots, tops, hoops and balls. They also play games like knuckle bones, using small bones or stones as dice. It's simple, but it keeps them entertained. Public festivals provide spectacle and community. Religious processions, sacrifices, feasts and performances bring the city together, reinforcing social bonds and shared identity. These aren't optional. They're civic obligations that everyone, citizens, women, children, even slaves, participate in to varying degrees. Entertainment in ancient Greece is not passive. It's participatory, communal, and deeply meaningful. It connects you to your city, your gods, and your fellow citizens. And after a long day of labour, politics and survival, it's a welcome relief. As the sun sets on another day in ancient Greece, you return home exhausted, hungry, and ready for whatever rest your uncomfortable bed can provide. The city quiets, oil lamps flicker in windows, and the sounds of the day fade into the darkness. You've survived. Barely. You've navigated the chaos of the agora, the discomfort of public latrines, the heat of the afternoon sun, and the rigid social hierarchies that define every interaction. You've eaten stale bread, drunk watered wine, and endured the smells, sounds, and sights of a city that has no concept of personal space or modern hygiene. If you're a man, you've participated in democracy, exercised at the gymnasium, and maybe attended a symposium where philosophy and wine flowed in equal measure. If you're a woman, you've managed the household, supervised slaves, and woven thread into cloth, your world confined to the walls of your home. You've honoured the gods, made offerings, and hoped they're pleased enough not to smite you. You've attended festivals, watched theatre, and cheered for athletes who compete naked for glory and olive wreaths. You've witnessed the birth of ideas that will shape Western civilization, democracy, philosophy, drama, rational medicine, all emerging from this chaotic, brilliant, deeply flawed society. The conversations you overhear in the agora, the plays you watch in the theatre, the debates you participate in at the assembly, all of it is history being written in real time. But you've also seen the darkness, the slavery that underpins the economy, the subjugation of women, the casual violence of war and punishment, the superstition and fear that coexist alongside reason and inquiry. Ancient Greece is a paradox, a society that produces unparalleled intellectual achievements while maintaining brutal social hierarchies. As you lie down, your body aching from the day's labour, you think about the world you inhabit. It's harsh, unforgiving, and often cruel. But it's also vibrant, alive with ideas and energy. The Greeks are building something unprecedented, a civilization that values human potential, celebrates beauty and excellence, and dares to ask fundamental questions about existence, justice, and the nature of reality. You pull your rough wool blanket over yourself, listening to the sounds of the city settling into night. Somewhere, a symposium is still going. Somewhere, a baby is crying. Somewhere, the gods are watching, indifferent or amused. Tomorrow, you'll wake up and do it all again, The bread will still be stale, the wine still watered, the work still exhausting, but you'll endure, because that's what Greeks do. They endure, they strive, they create, and they leave a legacy that will echo through millennia. You close your eyes, and sleep takes you. Another day in ancient Greece is over, and honestly, you're not sure you could handle another one. But the Greeks don't have a choice. This is their life, every day, for their entire lives. And somehow, despite everything, they thrive. They build cities, craft masterpieces, and ask questions that humanity is still trying to answer. So, the next time someone romanticizes ancient Greece as some golden age of wisdom and beauty, remember this. Remember the sweat, the filth, the inequality, and the hardship. Remember that democracy was built on the backs of slaves, that philosophy flourished while women were silenced, that marble temples stood above streets filled with sewage. Ancient Greece is complicated, contradictory, and utterly fascinating. It's the birthplace of so much that we value: reason, democracy, art, science. But it's also a reminder that progress is messy, that civilization is built on foundations both noble and brutal. You wouldn't last a day in ancient Greece. But maybe that's okay, because the Greeks, for all their flaws, created something that transcended their own time and place. They gave us the tools to question, to debate, to imagine a better world. And that, perhaps, is their greatest legacy. The day is done, the sun has set on ancient Athens, and somewhere across the centuries their ideas still burn bright. Let's talk about something that modern depictions of ancient Greece conveniently gloss over: slavery. Because you can't understand a day in ancient Greece without confronting the uncomfortable truth that this entire civilization, with its democracy, philosophy, and art, is built on the systematic exploitation of human beings who have no rights, no freedom, and no hope of escape. Slavery is everywhere in ancient Greece. It's not a marginal institution or a controversial practice. It's fundamental to the economy, to household management, to the entire social structure. Estimates suggest that slaves make up anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 of the population in Athens, possibly more in other city-states. We're talking about tens of thousands of people living in bondage. If you're a slave in ancient Greece, you might be a war captive, taken during one of the countless conflicts between city-states or foreign invasions. You might have been born into slavery, the child of enslaved parents, automatically inheriting their status. You might have been kidnapped by pirates and sold at auction. Or you might be a Greek who fell into debt and was sold by creditors, though this is technically illegal in Athens after Solon's reforms, though it still happens in other cities. Your life as a slave depends entirely on who owns you and what work you're assigned. If you're owned by a wealthy household, you might be a domestic servant, cooking, cleaning, fetching water, or caring for children. The work is constant and exhausting, but at least you're not being worked to death in the mines. Domestic slaves have it relatively better, though better is a grimly relative term. You sleep in the courtyard or in a small room, you eat the leftovers from your master's table, and you wear hand-me-down clothing. You have no privacy, no personal possessions, and no control over your own body. Your master can beat you, sell you, or use you sexually, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Male slaves are vulnerable to physical abuse. Female slaves are vulnerable to everything, including rape by their masters, which isn't even considered a crime. Some slaves are trusted with significant responsibilities. Educated slaves might work as tutors, teaching their masters' children reading, writing, and music. Others manage businesses, handle accounting, or represent their owners in commercial transactions. A few exceptional slaves particularly those skilled in medicine or philosophy, achieve a measure of respect and relative autonomy, but they're still slaves, subject to their master's whims. Then there are the slaves who have it far worse. Agricultural slaves work the fields, often in chain gangs, labouring from dawn to dusk with minimal food and brutal overseers. They sleep in barracks, eat gruel, and die young from exhaustion, malnutrition, or accidents. But the worst fate is reserved for slaves sent to the mines. The Laurian silver mines near Athens are a living hell. Thousands of slaves are crammed into underground tunnels, chained together, working in near total darkness. The air is thick with dust and toxic fumes. Cave-ins are common. Beatings are constant. Life expectancy is measured in months, not years. These miners work bent double in narrow shafts, hacking at rock with primitive tools, their bodies covered in sores and scars. They rarely see sunlight. They're fed just enough to keep working. When they collapse from exhaustion or injury, they're left to die in the tunnels, their bodies dragged out and replaced by fresh slaves. The silver extracted from these mines funds Athens' navy, pays for public buildings, and finances the democracy that citizen males are so proud of. The Parthenon, that gleaming symbol of Greek achievement, is built with silver mined by slaves dying in the dark. Legally, slaves are property, not people. They can be bought, sold, rented, or inherited like furniture. They can't own property, can't marry legally, though some form relationships, and can't testify in court except under torture, because the Greeks believe slaves will only tell the truth if they're being hurt. Manumission, the freeing of slaves, happens, but it's rare. Some masters free loyal slaves in their wills. Others allow skilled slaves to buy their freedom after years of saving tiny amounts of money. But the vast majority of slaves remain enslaved for life, and their children after them. Freed slaves become metics, resident foreigners, with slightly more rights than slaves, but far fewer than citizens. They can work, own property, and live independently, but they can't vote, can't hold public office, and they're still subject to special taxes and restrictions. Freedom in ancient Greece is always conditional. The Greeks justify slavery with various arguments. Aristotle, one of history's greatest philosophers, argues that some people are natural slaves, inferior by nature, and suited only for manual labour. He claims they lack the rational capacity for self-governance and therefore benefit from being controlled by superior minds. It's a self-serving justification that conveniently overlooks the intelligence and humanity of the enslaved. You walk through Athens, and slaves are everywhere, invisible and essential. They carry water jugs on their heads, they sweep the streets, they stand silently in the background, while their masters debate philosophy in the agora. They're the infrastructure of Greek civilization, the unseen labour that makes everything else possible. And if you're an average citizen, you probably own at least one or two slaves yourself. It's normal, expected, unquestioned. You don't lose sleep over it. You don't debate the morality. It's just how the world works. But that doesn't make it any less horrific. Ancient Greece, for all its achievements, is a society built on the brutal exploitation of human beings. Democracy for some requires slavery for others. Philosophy and art flourish while thousands suffer in bondage. As the day ends, you might pass a slave on the street, hauling a heavy load, face blank with exhaustion. You don't think much of it. Neither does anyone else. Because in ancient Greece, some people are simply worth more than others. And that's a truth more uncomfortable than any other. Now, let's discuss something ancient Greece is actually famous for, something that genuinely changes the world: philosophy. Because while the streets are filled with sewage and the economy runs on slavery, there are also men walking around asking the most profound questions humanity has ever posed. If you're in Athens during the classical period, you might encounter Socrates, an odd-looking man with a snub nose and bulging eyes, wandering barefoot through the agora, stopping people to ask them uncomfortable questions. What is justice? What is virtue? Do you really know what you think you know? Socrates doesn't write anything down. He doesn't charge for his teachings. He just talks, relentlessly, using a method of questioning that exposes contradictions in people's beliefs and forces them to examine their assumptions. It's called the Socratic method, and it's incredibly annoying to anyone who just wants to buy some fish and go home. He gathers followers, young men from wealthy, families who find him fascinating. Plato is one of them, an aristocratic youth who becomes Socrates' most famous student, and after Socrates' execution, his greatest advocate. Socrates' questions aren't idle curiosities. They're revolutionary. He challenges traditional values, religious beliefs, and political authorities. He argues that the unexamined life is not worth living, that virtue is knowledge, and that no one does wrong knowingly. If people understood what was truly good, he claims, they would always choose it. The Athenian authorities don't appreciate this. They see Socrates as a corrupting influence, someone who undermines respect for the gods and teaches young people to question everything. In 399 BCE, he's put on trial for impiety and corrupting the youth. He defends himself with characteristic defiance, refusing to apologize or moderate his views. The jury convicts him, and he's sentenced to death. Socrates accepts his sentence calmly. He could escape. His friends offer to bribe the guards, but he refuses, arguing that it would be wrong to break the laws of Athens, even unjust ones. He drinks the hemlock poison, surrounded by grieving students, and dies philosophically discussing the immortality of the soul. Plato never gets over it. He spends the rest of his life writing dialogues featuring Socrates, preserving his teacher's ideas and developing them further. Plato establishes the Academy, a school of philosophy that lasts for centuries. Plato's philosophy is complex and influential. He argues that the physical world is merely a shadow of a higher reality, a realm of perfect eternal forms. Everything we see is an imperfect copy of these ideal forms. A beautiful person is beautiful because they participate in the form of beauty. A just action is just because it reflects the form of justice. This theory has profound implications. It means that true knowledge comes not from sensory experience, but from rational contemplation of these forms. Philosophers, who can grasp these eternal truths, should rule society. Democracy, which gives power to the ignorant masses, is a flawed system. Plato's ideal state, described in the Republic, is an authoritarian meritocracy ruled by philosopher kings. It's elitist, anti-democratic, and deeply influential. For better and worse, Plato shapes Western philosophy for millennia. Then there's Aristotle, Plato's student, who disagrees with his teacher on almost everything. Aristotle doesn't believe in a separate realm of forms. He thinks knowledge comes from observing the physical world, classifying phenomena, and understanding their causes. Aristotle is the father of empirical science. He studies biology, physics, politics, ethics, logic, and rhetoric, making contributions to all of them. He dissects animals, categorizes species, and develops theories about how the natural world works. Some of his conclusions are wrong, hilariously so by modern standards, but his method, careful, observation and logical analysis, is revolutionary. In ethics, Aristotle argues that the good life is one of virtue, not pleasure or wealth. Virtue is a habit, developed through practice, a mean between extremes. Courage is the balance between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity is the balance between stinginess and wastefulness. The goal is eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, but really meaning flourishing or living well. Aristotle also writes extensively on politics, arguing that humans are by nature political animals who achieve their full potential only within a community. He examines different forms of government, monarchy, aristocracy, democracy, and their corruptions, tyranny, oligarchy, mob rule, and suggests that the best system is a mixed constitution that balances competing interests. Unfortunately, Aristotle also provides philosophical justification for slavery and the subordination of women, arguing that both are natural and necessary. He claims women are rational but lack authority, and that some people are naturally suited to be ruled rather than to rule. His enormous influence means these ideas persist for centuries, shaping Western thought in deeply harmful ways. Meanwhile, other philosophers are developing different schools of thought. The Cynics, led by Diogenes, reject social conventions entirely. Diogenes lives in a barrel, owns nothing, and publicly mocks the wealthy and powerful. When Alexander the Great visits him and asks if there's anything he can do for him, Diogenes reportedly says, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." The Epicureans, founded by Epicurus, argue that the good life is one of a moderate pleasure and freedom from pain and fear, particularly fear of death and the gods. Contrary to popular belief, they don't advocate hedonistic excess. They recommend simple pleasures, friendship, and philosophical contemplation. The Stoics, founded by Zeno, teach that virtue is the only true good and that we should accept fate with equanimity. External circumstances, wealth, health, even life itself, are indifferent. What matters is our response to them, maintaining rational control and living in accordance with nature. If you're walking through Athens, you might stumble upon any of these philosophers holding forth in the agora, under a colonnade, or at the gymnasium. Philosophy isn't an academic discipline confined to universities. It's a public practice, a way of life, a constant conversation about how to live well. These ideas, debated in the streets of ancient Athens, become the foundation of Western philosophy. They shape how we think about ethics, politics, knowledge, and reality. They influence Christianity, Islam, and secular thought alike. And all of it is happening right now, in real time, in a city that also features public executions, slavery, and streets filled with waste. Ancient Greece contains multitudes, the sublime and the squalid, genius and brutality, all existing side by side. As you listen to a philosopher debate the nature of justice, a slave walks past carrying water. Both are part of the same world, the same moment in history, and both, in their own way, are shaping the future. Let's talk about war, because ancient Greece is never not at war. City-states fight each other constantly, forming and breaking alliances, invading neighbours, and settling disputes with bronze-tipped spears instead of diplomacy. If you're a male citizen, you're also a soldier, and sooner or later you're going to fight. Greek warfare is defined by the hoplite, a heavily armed infantry soldier. If you're a citizen of moderate wealth, you're expected to provide your own equipment, a bronze helmet with a distinctive crest, a breastplate or cuirass, greaves to protect your shins, a large round shield called a hoplon, a spear about 8 feet long, and a short sword as a backup weapon. This equipment is expensive, roughly the cost of several months' wages for an average worker. Poorer citizens serve as light infantry or rowers in the navy. The wealthy fight on horseback as cavalry, though Greek cavalry is generally less effective than infantry. The core of the Greek army is the phalanx, a dense formation of hoplites standing shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping, spears projecting forward like a wall of bronze and iron. It's a terrifying sight, a human steamroller that advances slowly but inexorably, grinding down anything in its path. Fighting in a phalanx requires discipline, courage, and trust in the man beside you. If you break formation, you expose yourself and your comrades to enemy attacks. If you hold the line, you're relatively protected by the mass of shields and bodies around you, but it's claustrophobic, terrifying, and exhausting. The helmet limits your vision and hearing. The shield is heavy, about 15 pounds of wood and bronze, carried on your left arm with a grip in the centre. Your right arm wields the spear, thrusting at enemies while trying not to hit your own side. The heat inside your armour is suffocating. Sweat pours down your face. Your muscles scream. And the noise, the clash of bronze on bronze, the screams of the wounded, the shouted orders is deafening. Battle is brief but brutal. Phalanxes charge at each other, collide with a thunderous crash, and then it's a brutal shoving match. The front ranks stab at enemies while the rear ranks push forward, adding weight and momentum. Men stumble, fall, and are trampled. The wounded are pulled back if possible, left to die if not. If one side breaks, the battle is over. The losing army flees and the victors pursue, cutting down stragglers. This is when most casualties occur. Fighting in formation is relatively safe. Running away is deadly. After the battle, the victors strip the dead of armour and weapons, valuable spoils of war. They set up a trophy, a monument made from captured arms, and allow the losers to retrieve their dead for burial under a truce. Leaving the dead unburied is a grave dishonour, so defeated armies often sue for peace just to reclaim their fallen. Sieges are rare in classical Greece because cities are well fortified and armies lack the technology for effective siege warfare. Instead, wars are fought through raids, skirmishes, and set-piece battles in open fields. The goal is usually not to conquer territory, but to humiliate the enemy, destroy crops, and force them to submit. The Persian Wars are the defining conflict of the early classical period. The Persian Empire, the largest and most powerful state in the world, invades Greece twice, in 490 BCE and 480 BCE, attempting to punish Athens for supporting rebellions in Asia Minor. At Marathon in 490 BCE, a vastly outnumbered Athenian force defeats the Persians in a shocking upset. The Athenians charge at a run, breaking the Persian lines and driving them back to their ships. It's a stunning victory that becomes legendary, the birth of the marathon race named after the runner who supposedly ran 26 miles to Athens to announce the victory before collapsing dead. 10 years later, the Persians return with a massive army and navy led by King Xerxes. This time, all of Greece is threatened. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans and a few thousand allies hold a narrow pass against the entire Persian army for 3 days, inflicting heavy casualties before being betrayed and annihilated. It's a heroic last stand, immortalized in legend. Meanwhile, the Athenian navy, built with silver from the Laurian mines worked by slaves, defeats the Persian fleet at Salamis. The Athenian general Themistocles lures the Persian ships into a narrow strait, where their numbers are a disadvantage, and the Greek triremes ram and sink them in a chaotic melee. The following year, the combined Greek armies defeat the Persians at Plataea, driving them out of Greece for good. The victories cement Athens' reputation as the saviour of Greece and lead to the formation of the Delian League, an alliance that Athens gradually transforms into an empire. But Greek unity is short-lived. The Peloponnesian War, fought between Athens and Sparta from 431 to 404 BCE, is a brutal, decades-long conflict that devastates Greece. It's a war of contrasts. Athens, a naval democracy, versus Sparta, a land-based oligarchy. Pericles' strategy is to avoid land battles, rely on Athens' walls and navy, and outlast Sparta. It works until a plague strikes Athens, killing a third of the population, including Pericles himself. The war drags on with shifting fortunes, temporary truces, and shocking atrocities. The Athenians execute the male population of Melos and enslave the women and children for refusing to join their alliance. The Spartans massacre prisoners and destroy entire cities. Finally, with Persian financial support, Sparta builds a navy and defeats Athens at Aegospotami in 405 BCE. Athens surrenders. Its walls are torn down, its empire dismantled. Sparta is victorious but exhausted, and Greece as a whole is weakened, vulnerable to the next great power, Macedon. If you're a soldier in these wars, you experience the full horror of ancient combat. You see friends die beside you, blood pooling in the dust. You kill men you've never met, thrusting your spear into their bodies, feeling the resistance of flesh and bone. You survive by luck as much as skill. When you return home, if you return home, you're expected to resume normal life. There's no PTSD diagnosis, no therapy, no veterans benefits. You just carry the trauma silently, haunted by what you've seen and done. War in ancient Greece is brutal, frequent, and inescapable. It's not glorious, though poets and politicians pretend it is. It's ugly, terrifying, and wasteful. But it's also fundamental to Greek identity, a test of courage and a source of honour. You pray you never have to fight. But if the city calls, you pick up your spear and shield and you march. Because that's what citizens do. That's what it means to be Greek. Let's shift to something more mundane but equally essential: trade and commerce. Because ancient Greece isn't self-sufficient, and survival depends on complex networks of exchange, both within the city and across the Mediterranean. The agora is the heart of Athenian commercial life. It's a large open space surrounded by colonnades, shops and public buildings, bustling with activity from dawn to dusk. Vendors set up stalls selling everything imaginable: grain, olive oil, wine, fish, meat, vegetables, pottery, cloth, tools, sandals, jewellery, perfumes, and more. Prices are haggled, not fixed. You don't walk up, pay the listed price, and leave. You negotiate, argue, and try to get a better deal. Vendors inflate their initial prices, expecting you to bargain down. It's a game, a social ritual, and a test of wit. Coinage exists, but it's relatively new, only a few centuries old. Athens mints silver drachmas, featuring the owl of Athena on one side, a symbol recognized across the Mediterranean. Smaller denominations include obols, 6 of which equal 1 drachma. For large transactions, a talent worth 6,000 drachmas is used, though that's more an accounting unit than actual coinage. Not everyone uses money. Barter is still common, especially in rural areas. You trade your surplus grain for your neighbour's olive oil, your eggs for someone's pottery. It's direct, personal, and doesn't require currency. Athens imports vast amounts of grain, mostly from the Black Sea region, because Attica's rocky soil can't produce enough to feed its population. The city depends on maritime trade, and controlling the sea lanes is a matter of survival. This dependence shapes Athenian foreign policy and justifies the powerful navy. Merchants are a distinct class, neither aristocrats nor common labourers. Some are wealthy, owning multiple ships and trading networks. Others are small-time operators sailing a single vessel and barely scraping by. The risks are enormous. Storms, pirates, shipwrecks, and dishonest partners all threaten profits. Metics, resident foreigners, dominate commerce. Citizens often view trade as beneath them, preferring to earn money from land ownership or public service. Metics fill the gap, becoming successful merchants, craftsmen, and bankers. They pay special taxes, can't own land, and can't participate in politics, but they're essential to the economy. Banking exists in a primitive form. Bankers, usually metics, accept deposits, make loans, and facilitate currency exchange. Interest rates are high, around 12 to 18% annually, reflecting the risks involved. There's no deposit insurance, no central bank, no regulation. If your banker goes bankrupt or absconds, you're out of luck. Loans finance trade voyages, land purchases, and business ventures. Collateral is required, and defaulting can lead to enslavement or seizure of property. Debt is serious business, and debtors' prisons don't exist, but public shame and legal penalties do. Trade isn't just economic, it's cultural. Greek merchants travelled to Egypt, Phoenicia, the Black Sea, Sicily and beyond, bringing back not just goods but ideas, technologies and stories. Greek colonies are established across the Mediterranean, spreading Greek culture and facilitating trade. These colonies, places like Syracuse in Sicily or Massalia in Gaul, modern Marseille, are independent city-states, but they maintain ties with their mother cities, sending offerings to shared sanctuaries and participating in pan-Hellenic festivals like the Olympics. Trade goods reveal the interconnectedness of the ancient world. Athenian pottery is found in tombs in Italy and France. Egyptian papyrus is used by Greek scribes. Scythian grain feeds Athenian citizens. Phoenician purple dye colours Greek robes. The Mediterranean is a vast trade network, and Greece is at its centre. Markets are noisy, chaotic, and occasionally violent. Fights break out over disputes, cheating is common, and pickpockets work the crowds. Market inspectors, agoranomoi, patrol the agora, checking weights and measures, resolving disputes and maintaining order. But enforcement is inconsistent, and sharp practices are expected. Women rarely visit the agora. Shopping is done by male heads of household, or more commonly, by slaves sent with a list and money. Respectable women stay home, their interaction with the public marketplace mediated by men and slaves. If you're buying food for the day, you haggle with the fishmonger over the price of sardines, inspect vegetables for freshness, and purchase a loaf of bread from the baker. The bread is still warm, the fish still smells like the sea, and the vegetables are covered in dirt because washing produce isn't a priority. You pay in small coins, obols and drachmas, counted carefully because inflation and debasement of currency are constant worries. You carry your purchases home in a woven basket or wrapped in cloth, navigating the crowded streets and avoiding the filth underfoot. Commerce in ancient Greece is personal, direct, and essential. It's how you survive, how you connect with the wider world, and how wealth is created and distributed. It's not romantic or glamorous, but it's real, the mundane economic activity that underpins everything else. As you leave the agora, purchases in hand, you're part of a vast network of exchange that stretches across the known world. It's one of the forces holding Greek civilization together, along with language, religion, and shared culture. And it's just another part of your daily life in ancient Greece. As the sun finally sets on your day in ancient Greece, casting long shadows across the marble temples and dusty streets, you realize something profound. You've survived, barely, but you've survived. You've navigated a world so foreign, so brutal, and yet so foundational to everything you know about Western civilization that it's almost impossible to reconcile the two. Ancient Greece is a paradox wrapped in a contradiction and served on a plate of questionable hygiene. It's the birthplace of democracy, but only for a privileged few. It's the home of philosophy, but also of unquestioning acceptance of slavery. It's a society that celebrates the human form and intellect, while simultaneously subjugating half its population based on gender and the other half based on social status. You've seen the heights of human achievement, the Parthenon gleaming on the Acropolis, philosophers debating the nature of reality, playwrights crafting tragedies, that still move audiences millennia later, athletes pushing their bodies to the limits of human performance. But you've also seen the depths. Slaves worked to death in mines, women confined to domestic invisibility, brutal warfare, casual violence, and a complete absence of anything resembling modern comfort or hygiene. The Greeks don't have running water, but they have Socrates. They don't have antibiotics, but they have Hippocrates developing rational medicine. They don't have gender equality, but they have Sappho writing poetry of stunning beauty and emotional depth. They don't have human rights, but they have the concept of isonomia, equality under the law, at least for citizens. Every aspect of your day has been a reminder that the past is not a golden age to be nostalgically longed for, but a harsh reality that our ancestors endured through necessity, not choice. The romantic image of ancient Greece, all white marble and philosophical enlightenment, dissolves when confronted with the reality of daily life, the smells, the labour, the disease, the inequality, the violence. But here's the thing, the Greeks know their world is hard. They don't have illusions about easy living. Their literature is filled with acknowledgement of human suffering, from Homer's epics of war and wandering to the tragedies of Sophocles, exploring fate, loss, and the limits of human control. The Greeks face their harsh reality and respond not with despair, but with creativity, inquiry, and a determination to understand their place in the cosmos. They ask questions that still resonate. What is justice? What is the good life? How should society be organized? What is the nature of reality? What makes an action right or wrong? These aren't idle academic exercises, they're desperate attempts to find meaning and order in a chaotic, often cruel world. The legacy of ancient Greece is complicated. We inherit their philosophy, their drama, their political concepts, their art, and their architecture. But we also inherit their blind spots, their justifications for slavery and patriarchy, their ethnic chauvinism, their casual cruelty. For centuries, Western civilization has celebrated Greek achievements, while often ignoring or minimizing the brutal realities that made those achievements possible. Modern democracies trace their lineage to Athens, but we've had to expand and revise that concept dramatically. The Athenian democracy that Greeks were so proud of would be utterly unacceptable today, excluding the majority of the population from political participation. True democratic ideals, universal suffrage, equal rights, protection of minorities, these come from centuries of struggle and reform, often against the grain of classical precedents. Greek philosophy shapes how we think, but we've also had to challenge and revise it. Aristotle's logic and empiricism are foundational, but his defences of slavery and female inferiority are rightly rejected. Plato's philosophical insights are profound, but his authoritarian political vision is dangerous. As you prepare for sleep in your uncomfortable bed, listening to the sounds of the ancient city settling into darkness, you realize that ancient Greece is neither a paradise to be idealized, nor a hellscape to be dismissed. It's a human society with all the complexity, contradiction, and capacity for both greatness and cruelty that implies. The Greeks are people struggling to survive, to understand, to create meaning in a difficult world. They're not superhuman heroes or enlightened sages. They're farmers and merchants, philosophers and slaves, soldiers and housewives, all trying to navigate their circumstances as best they can. Their achievements are real and remarkable. Creating democracy, even in its limited form, is revolutionary. Developing philosophy, science, and rational inquiry is transformative. Producing art, literature, and architecture of enduring beauty is extraordinary. But these achievements don't erase the suffering, the injustice, and the brutality that coexist alongside them. What ancient Greece teaches us, more than anything, is that human civilization is always a work in progress, a constant struggle between our highest ideals and our worst impulses. The Greeks gave us tools, intellectual, political, artistic, to continue that struggle. But they also remind us how far we still have to go. You wouldn't last a day in ancient Greece, not really. The physical hardships alone would probably break you before noon. But maybe that's okay, because we're not meant to live in the past. We're meant to learn from it, to take what's valuable and leave behind what's harmful, to build on the foundations laid by our ancestors, while recognizing and correcting their mistakes. As you close your eyes, exhausted from your day in ancient Athens, you're grateful for hot showers, modern medicine, equal rights, indoor plumbing, and all the other amenities of modern life that make daily existence bearable and often enjoyable. But you're also grateful for the legacy of those grimy, smelly, complicated Greeks who, despite everything, managed to ask the right questions and begin the long process of answering them. The day is done. Ancient Athens sleeps, and somewhere across the vast gulf of time, their ideas, their questions, and their stubborn insistence that humans can understand and improve their world continue to inspire, challenge, and guide us. That's the real legacy of ancient Greece, not marble temples or bronze statues, but the enduring belief that we can question, we can think, we can create, and we can, however imperfectly, make things better. And with that thought, you finally drift off to sleep in your impossibly uncomfortable ancient Greek bed, grateful beyond measure that you'll wake up in the 21st century, where at least the bread is soft and the toilet paper is plentiful.